So, blasting barriers, what is that term all about? Well, simply stated, blasting barriers is what we all do every moment that we're awake and thinking about and strategizing and planning our day, our near field futures, our long-term visions, and the obstacles, battling the obstacles that, come up, and in the pursuance of those things. With each barrier that we get around, break through, otherwise settle, and emerge victorious, that's a blasting through, hence. And over the path of life, we acquire many blasted barriers, as they were and are. And the term was planted in my high school brain by a teacher I had, non-music teacher, core teacher at the high school I went to, John Freeman. And it lie in my mind since those days dormant. And as I move through my adult life and continue to move through my life as on a whole, the phrase came back to mind at particular intersections. And I really had a deepened meaning that grew out of those circumstances. It caused me to really reflect on the term and reflect on others around me, namely my parents. And around the time that both were making their exit, reflecting on just how many huge barriers they blasted through, even before I showed up in their lives, and how many people with backstories like theirs, the unmentionable proportions of barriers to their natural existence that they routinely blast through. And so the term really gained traction for me and really deepened even my understanding of where he was probably coming from as a teacher and being so many years ahead of me in this life. But what he saw in me relative to, being a high school kid, and what he saw in his observations as a black male high school kid amongst high school kids there, and how the various ways that I differentiated myself in that environment. And so it was always in a spirit of encouragement that he would, say that to me. His nickname for me still is Fredder, and Fredder comes from official school documents that had the autofill, or what we would call autofill now, for my first name. And my first name has 9 letters, and it would be too many letters for the amount of boxes allotted. So ICK would always get cut off, and my name was Fredder on official documents. So it jumped off of there, and so as a sentence might go, there's Fredder blasting those barriers and kicking down the stereotypes. And as I say, later in life, it grew on much more deeper meaning than just that somewhat jovial level of meaning. And so one example in my young adult life are these drums that I'm seated next to. And the barrier that I had at that age, and every young drummer has, well, I don't know so much anymore. Certainly the average black or brown drummer doesn't have these issues, or has the issues of not being able to afford semi-professional level or professional level drums. And I found myself in 1991 facing that issue as I was returning home to San Francisco from my first foray on the East Coast going to college. And I was in my dorm room one night late in the semester, during my last semester, and was reading through Modern Drummer, and in the back they had all the ads for various vendors. And I saw this ad that said, "Make your own drums." And it had a picture of a naked drum shell, and the drum itself, but without any of the fittings on it. No heads, no nothing, just the wood cylinder. And read a couple more ads that followed that, and this was during a time when custom drum companies, single owner proprietorships were on the rise and were popular. And I knew what I was going back home to, which was a fine instrument for my, beginning years and getting started. And, again, barriers being blasted. One of them, that was the kit my mother could buy for me. And I mean, it was entry level as entry level was, but I was able to work. And that's all that, mattered to her, was that she was enabling me, she was setting me up to be successful. And so when I returned to San Francisco, one of the things I commenced to doing, in addition to picking up where I left off in moving through my undergraduate education, was I started making drums. I made, between 1992, had I started by then? Somewhere around there, 92, 93, and 1998. I started teaching myself how to make drums, and I made 5 families of drums. This set of drums was family number 4, is family number 4. Vintage around 1997, 96, somewhere in there. And now that I'm living back on the East Coast, as I've come full circle, this drum kit and the other families that I have downstairs are examples of what have made full circle with me, but in the reverse ellipse, if you will. I came to the East Coast as a young college student, and on my way back, discovered this thing via Modern Drummer, thanks Modern Drummer, that I could make my own drums out of professional drum level material and not break the bank, which I didn't have to break. And I wish it was that easy for pianos. but with drums, one can do that. And so that's what started Harris Drums and making drums. And now, over 3 decades later, being a resident on the East Coast again, and I have these artifacts that I'm bringing back, like bringing back the riches that I left out of here over 30 years ago with just an idea. And as they say, go west, or said, go west, young man. Well, west is home for me, home. And now that east is a return to a second home, and as far as I'm concerned, permanent home for the rest of my time on this planet here, these made it along the way. And so they're reminders of the major barrier that I blasted through pertaining to me going back home to San Francisco in the first place in 91. And then all of the other barriers in my life in San Francisco over the last 3 decades that I've confronted and I've survived and emerged victorious even in some circumstances. That is the grist for the mill from myself, and that meaning of that term, Blastin barriers. I started using the term professionally in 2009 in a concert presentation that was the culmination of work that I received a grant from the San Francisco Arts Commission to complete. And in my personal life at that time, and what was going on with it, but also what was going on in San Francisco proper, in the Bay Area, in terms of issues like housing and homelessness, etc. It was a phrase that, I mean, I didn't know, but it caught fire in the context of the concert. And it had a lot of resonance with people. And so it was kind of like, oh, shucky darn, look, who thought, you know, that I wasn't thinking about marketing when I was just thinking about my own personal testimony. Whenever I perform, it's not just an exercise of, you know, grandiosity of ego or look what I can do. That has never really been a driver for me. Perhaps ironically, to some people who are familiar with me. I'm natural on stage, and I love performing on stage, but it's personal. And so as such, what that level is about for me, it doesn't require the stage. And that's where I feel like I'm not, you know, I don't have the thing that most people that are on stage, musicians or otherwise, have, where they need to be on stage. They need that adulation from people, or they need whatever that is. That's never been a driver for me. It's nice, but what's nicer for me personally is in the framework of that context of preparing oneself. And then you go through that, you run that gauntlet, which is the thing all of itself in terms of the mind. And you emerge successful, not because of people rolling around in the aisles frothing at the mouth, but because you saw yourself go through a thing from just a thought to making the manifestation of that happen. And it is a good manifestation, or better even than good. And you can feel proud about it. And then all of this is a confirmation of what already is going on in here in terms of an acknowledgement. Yeah, I did it. It's in the realm of what I expected it to be. This could have been better. That was exceptional about it, or however that discussion goes. But it's those things that I found in my life, those moments, those intersections that have given me the most bang for my buck in terms of my self-actualization and my, you know, my self-observation. You know, who do I, to me, not only think I am, believe I am? What are the things that comprise that and make that up? And last on that list is what others tell me I am. Because oftentimes, no matter how well-intended that might be, they're not you. So they don't know. You know, it doesn't necessarily align with what your self-concept is. And sometimes that's needed, that perspective, to also tweak how you conceive yourself. So it's a phrase that means, as I get older, a whole lot to me, because I use it as a part of my professional apparatus, but only because it's dealing with the raw earth of my life, which my profession is only a piece of, a part of. And it is what inspires me to continue. I've got some big barriers that I'm blasting through presently. And that's life, isn't it? We have little ones. Oh, I ran out of creamer for my coffee this morning, so I have to use the 1% milk that I have instead. Oh man, what a drag. And then obviously the so ginormously macro barriers that involve nations, involve people within them, involve their abilities to survive, and a long-term considerations, what's happening in this moment and its ripple effect for the next 5 generations. Talk about a barrier. So we all live with those. We all, as an act of navigating through our lives, can use or relate to that phrase as in one little quick explanation of what our lives entail. We're constantly blasting through barriers, and so much of the time, as I've expressed and hopefully communicated, it starts here, or those barriers start here. Because in order for us to do anything, we have to have thought first, something to propel us to do it, compel us to do it, an instinct. And so we constantly blast through the barriers in here in order to blast through the barriers outside. And that is what blasting barriers means. So, as far as marketing is concerned, around the time when I did the concert in 2009, I'm a total Flintstones junkie, always will be, though I haven't actually watched the Flintstones episode in many years. But I have so many of them committed to memory, it's as if I watched them non-stop. And one of my favorite episodes was when, I'm forgetting the actual storyline, the plot, in totality of the episode, but there was a scene where Fred and Barney were dealing with some teenagers, one way or the other. I think this was when Fred was when he had become an accidental rock star, and bedrock, twist. He had the guitar and the Elvis wig and like that. And I think it was that episode, and there was a scene depicting some teenagers thinking that he was square. And I remember the first clump of teenagers that were, dealing with this, examining what they were seeing amongst themselves, teenagers do. And one of the girls, she went like this. And she said, 4 corners, man! And so that image came to me in terms of my venture in 2009. And I just started riffing with that. And it's like, okay, if that's right, that's a wall, that's a barrier. And so what would depict blasting through it? Yeah, and then I thought of the old Bruce Lee movies from, the 70s and or martial arts videos, and somebody's holding, panels of wood, and then someone else, and breaks through the wood. And so 4 corners then combined with this gesture as blasting through them. And then the phrase goes, blast through the barriers of the mind. So finally, this. And so combined, we have our barrier, we blast through them, because ultimately the barrier is up here. Whatever manifestation is outside, 9 times out of 10, is secondary when we really stop and get still and examine it. It's set in motion here. Or in someone else's here, and it's placed on us. But the point is, they start there. So, that's something else that goes with my efforts here, is blast through the barriers of the mind.